Welcome to our short course, Creating a Budget for Your Church. My name is Josh Reeves, and I'm a part of the team at ChurchBiz. And we created this course for church planners who are creating a budget for the first time. And our hope is that you would create a budget that is simple, that fits your needs, and that can grow with your church. And so we put together this guide to help you walk through that process. One of the first things you need to consider as you're creating a budget is your income accounts. Now, these are accounts that are going to record the donations that are given to support your church. And if you're a church planner, you likely are receiving funds from both internal giving and external giving. What do I mean by that? Internal giving would be the giving from your core team or from those who have joined in with the work God is doing in your church. And there's also going to be people or groups outside of your church that are supporting you, whether that's denominations, networks, other churches, or people who are in your relational network who are giving to the work, but they're not a part of that work internally. And so, with this in mind, you might want to consider a few different income accounts to record this giving. First is a general tithes and offerings account. This is where you're going to receive all your donations, especially from internal giving and perhaps external, but it's where your main offerings are given and recorded. If you want to delineate between your internal and external givings, you could create an account for outside support. This is not required or essential, but it's something you could do if you want to keep a good eye on what's coming in from within your church and what's coming in from the outside. You also might create an income account for staff support. You might yourself be fundraised and certain gifts are specifically going to your salary, or you might have a team member on your church plant core team who is raising support from the outside, and you want to make sure that that doesn't get mixed in with the typical or the regular tithes and offerings that are given. These are just three examples that you can use. You could you could make more, you could make it more complicated, but I would recommend simplifying it in the beginning and having it at least two of these accounts, at least the general tithes and offerings and outside support. And if nothing else, just general tithes and offerings so you know what the income and giving is for your church. Another thing to consider is your projected giving and support. This is important because as you move to budgeting for expenses, you need to have a realistic idea of the money you're going to have to spend. You likely will not want to budget to a deficit, and so you want to budget based on what is coming into your church. And so, one of the things I would recommend is putting together a 3 to 5 year plan of moving from outside support to internal giving. I would say that most churches, not all churches, but most churches would like to be self sustaining by year 5 of their existence. Um, and so you can see my example here. In year 1, it could be that you're 90% outside support, 10% internal giving. In year 2, 75-25, 50-50 in year 3, 75-25 in year 4, 0, 100 in year 5, which would be the year that you're self sufficient as a church, that you're funded completely by the giving of those within your church. And so this is important because you want to have an idea of what you can realistically expect to come in giving wise over the life of your church plant. Because in those early years, you're going to be setting a budget based on projections. You're not going to have a lot of historical data. And so you want to know what is committed from outside support, what is a realistic goal for internal giving. This also gives you something to communicate with your core team to remind them that, hey, we've got a goal by year 2 of being 75-25. And I would encourage you to give them updates on where they stand on those goals. So, this is an example of how you can think through income projections. Step 2 of the budget creation process is establishing expense accounts. Now, there are 4 major budget areas I would encourage every budget to consider: personnel, operations, facilities, and mission/serving. Let's talk through each of these a little bit. Personnel would include things like salary, your staff salary, those you maybe you pay someone to come in and lead worship. They would be, a contract laborer that would be a part of that. It would include benefits. So if there's health insurance or if you're offering retirement, all of those things would fall under benefits. And then finally, taxes. You don't want to forget that there are going to be taxes that are paid. Some of you, if you're planning a church, you may have been an employee and you've never thought about that as an employer now, you're going to have to pay taxes on behalf of those who you employ. And so those are a few of the things to consider in personnel cost. Operations is another major category, and this is going to be the cost of your operating ministries. I've got a few specific examples I'll give you in a minute, but this is essentially the things like hospitality on a Sunday, the cost of running small groups. We want to do a big Easter bash, and so the cost of special events, things like that, the cost of operating ministries. Third major category is going to be facilities. No matter where you are as a church, you're going to meet somewhere. A lot of church plants are leasing or renting a space. And if you're lucky, or if God provides, you might have a space that you own or you have a mortgage on. And so you want to consider those costs. There's also going to be maintenance and upkeep. There's going to be improvements. There's going to be utilities that are due. Insurance, things like that would go under facilities. And then finally, missions and serving. Most churches want to participate locally in helping the poor, the widows, and the orphans. And so there might be certain serving partnerships that you have, and you're setting aside money that you want to give. And there's also churches participating in global and local mission. And so you want to have you want to budget for what you want to give towards those things. So those are the four major categories. And once you have those, you can then kind of start to build your expense accounts. You can see here in my example, I start with personnel. And I've given a number scheme to this. That number scheme is very broad and also allows you to get more detailed as you go as a church. And so you might start with just some major headers though, 2,000 personnel, and then you can see here 2,100 staff salary, 2,200 staff benefits, 2,300 employer taxes, staff travel, staff training. I would say these first three, staff salary, benefits, and employer taxes, almost every church plant is going to need those line items. And then the ones below you can kind of customize to what you need. And I would encourage you to stay broad at the major headings level. And then as your church grows, you can get more specific. So if you want to track individual staff members under staff salary, you could still have 2,100, but you would have 2,101 or 2,102, and then it would become a subcategory of staff salary. But in the beginning, I'd encourage you to be broad. And then as you learn your church and as you discover what the needs of your church are and how you want to report and budget, you can add subcategories to those things. And your accountant and bookkeeper can help you figure out how to do that in your reporting. I've got a 3,000 operations. And so some of the things you might think through in this category are Sunday worship, kids ministry, small groups, if you do those, special events, Easter bash or a summer Bible club, pastoral care, admin and office supplies, and then, finance and accounting. You don't want to forget to have and set aside money for finance and accounting. 4,000 is facilities. So rent, mortgage, office space or gathering space could be included in there. Again, you could build out 40 under 4,100, 4,101, and be more specific to this is our Sunday gathering space. 4,102 could be our office space if you have that in time. You want to have something for utilities, the cost of being in this space. And so electric, gas, trash, cleaning, internet. And then you don't want to forget that if you're meeting in a space, you need to have insurance. You need to have at least liability. Likely, if you're renting a space, the person who owns the space is going to have you have some sort of property insurance or renter's insurance. And so you want to make sure that you have the appropriate insurances in place to protect your church and protect you from the liabilities that you face. And then finally, there's 5,000 mission serving partnerships. And so I've got it divided up into the major headings of global and local missions. You could add 5,300 serving partnerships if you wanted to. And then again, you could create 5,101 to talk about a specific global partner, or 5,301 to talk about a specific serving partner. But you see how you build out from these major four categories to the major subcategories. And then you can go subcategories more specific under that as your budget grows. After you've established your main chart of accounts, you can begin to build your budget. And I'd recommend you can use our template. We're actually providing you with the free template as a part of this package or of this training. And so take that template and you can do it monthly, you can do it quarterly, you could do it on yearly totals. I've taken in this example and broken down a sample budget quarterly. And you can see I've put estimated numbers of what the cost would be each quarter. So under staff salary, that's one that's probably going to stay the same for the entire year. And you can see I've broken that out into quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, and then totaled it so we can see what that yearly cost is going to be. And then you can just go down the list and see how I've projected different costs there that give you a sample of what that might what that might be. And as you're starting out in the early days of your church plant, you're likely not going to have much historical data. And so you're going to have to guess on some of these things. You're going to have to make educated guesses. You're going to have to estimate. I would encourage you to talk to your board, talk to the financially minded people in your church to see what is realistic. Talk to the volunteers or other staff members and get their input on what their needs will be in their specific areas. As your church grows, you'll be able to hand off some of these categories over time to where, say, your small groups pastor is going to be responsible for everything in 3300 and projecting those, and then you'll take all that and compile it into one major budget, or your finance team will do that with you. You can see those categories here. I've just got some fake estimates in there. You'd need to take this and fill it out yourself. Again, we have a template we're providing that you can use for this, and I'd encourage you to keep it simple and organized like this. The earlier you are, the more broad and simple you want to keep the budget, and then as you grow, you can get more specific, add more subcategories in there. One other thing I'll note on the creating the budget is it's important to, you can decide whether you break it down monthly, yearly, quarterly. I'd probably recommend early on doing monthly, but averaging it out and then having a total. But you want to know the total projected number. So you can match that up with the projected giving and see, are we budgeting a zero-based budget, which means we're budgeting to spend exactly what comes in, or are we budgeting a deficit? And that might sound counterintuitive, but in the early days of a church plant, you might budget a deficit if, let's say, you've already got 100K raised in the bank and you're deciding that, hey, we're going to dip into some of that reserve. And so we're budgeting a deficit because we realize we're going to be growing as a church. And early on, we're not going to be as funded by our giving as we would like. But you want to do it in a way that whatever it is, you can explain it and have a good reason for why you're doing it. I'd also encourage you, you see here, I've broken down the per month need. Um, and I would have that number on hand just so you can communicate with your church as you have, let's say you have 12K given in a month and your per budget need is 133, as I've said here. Well, then you can communicate that, hey, we had a deficit this month and we're praying that God would meet that need each month. It gives you another opportunity to communicate with your church team. So you're going to create a spreadsheet likely and have a full budget. I didn't include the income on here, but you could also try to project, as I talked about earlier, income and add that as the top section of this budget. But you at least want to have your expense accounts created, and I'd encourage you to do this as well. As you get this budget, send it to your bookkeeper or accountant so that they can help you throughout the year stay on track, and so that you can get reports and updates on how are we doing staying within this budget. Again, this course is basically just to help you create the budget, but that's an encouragement to have an accountant, have a bookkeeper who can help you make sure that you're staying within this budget. And again, there are times as a church planner that there was something that comes up that was not predicted, and you just want to make sure that you're following it. And then when there is something that comes up, that you do have the money in reserves, or you're going to ask for that money to be provided by donations or from inside or external support. So again, this helps you track that and stay on that. And once you get your budget finished and finalized, or at least the rough draft, you want to seek approval and feedback. Now, if you're a church planner, you might not have a finance team established yet. It might just be you and a core team. Well, perhaps on that core team, there's someone who's financially minded, or perhaps from your sending church, there's someone who really has a background in finance and can help you think through that budget. Reach out to them, get help. Maybe you have an external board or trusted financial advisors. Have others look at your budget and make sure that you're not crazy, right? Make sure that your projections are realistic and make sure that what you're spending is aligning with your values as a church. Um, Getting feedback is important. If you have a team in place, you want to honor that team. They aren't likely the decision makers ultimately, but if you're putting them in the place to give feedback, take that feedback seriously, and use the counsel of many to give wisdom to your budget. And once your budget is approved, you can finalize it and keep that file. Again, send it to your accountant so they can help you keep track of that. And I would encourage you to share your final budget with your congregation. Now, that might not mean every line item is shared, but at least you're sharing a big picture snapshot of your four major categories. And you could include income as well and what you're hoping and praying would come in and show them that. But here I've got it broken down into personnel, operations, facilities, missions, serving partnerships. Once again, you could show them, hey, here's what we're budgeting for each of these. Here's the total. Here's the monthly need. Again, it's another way to communicate and remind your people in your church to give and to show them too that you have thoughtfully considered what you want to spend this year and how that aligns with your vision as a church. And so hopefully that gives you an idea of maybe how you could communicate with your church. You could put together slides or have your accountant put together some reports for you that show these things and are easily shareable. Some people ask, do we, should we share the whole budget with everyone in our church? I typically recommend to do that upon request. You can decide what aspects of that you want to share. Not everyone shares salaries. Some people do share salaries. You have to decide and discern what is best for your church and then have those things available. And I will say this for people joining your church plan, it's going to be a huge encouragement for them to know that you have a budget, that you have reporting, that you've got teams in place that are overseeing that this is not just some crazy rogue person planting a church and taking money. Lots of people have been burned financially. And so this is a way to gain trust with those who are giving and show them that, hey, we're using the money that you give in a way that reflects good stewardship. Finally, I want to say this. That's the majority of what we have for you, but we do have some frequently asked questions about budgeting, and there's a link that is in this PowerPoint. It'll be posted and linked to this video as well below. And we've just got as we work with churches, we get a lot of questions. And so we've put together a frequently asked questions that is really helpful. So I'd encourage you to check that out as you're budgeting. Also want to let you know that we do offer consulting for the budgeting process at ChurchBiz. If you're a client, you can talk to your client service rep or you can reach out to us, and we'd love to talk with you and help you think through how to budget well and create that budget. And I'll say this as well. If you're an existing church and you perhaps you're not a church plant, but you are looking to improve your budgeting process, take this resource and do that. I have several churches that I've worked with who have decided that, hey, our chart of accounts and where we're at, it doesn't reflect us as a church anymore. And in fact, it's gotten too convoluted and complex. And so we need to redo that. And so use this process as well to refine your budget as a church. And hopefully it'll help you create a budget that is simple, that meets your needs, and that can continue to grow with you as a church. Here's our contact. You can call us. You can go to our website to check out more resources. You can email us for more info. We'd love to help and partner with you and hope that churches would be strengthened by this training. Thank you so much.